Yoim Aleph, Dachol Moed Sukkos Tovshin Peivav. Bruchim Habom B'Shem Hashem. Irgend Sheter, like welcome the ganze Choshev Oilem, Agit Moed, Agit Yom Tov, the Gewaldig Kiddush Hashem, that Chalamoid all over the Irgend Sheter is making Shir Torah Barabim for hundreds of people each location to come, they listen to Shir Torah of Gdol Yisrael, to have the Schir, to have with us like every Sunday morning. Harav Hagoin Rabbi Yakov Zev Smith Shlita Magachi Irgend Sheter, who's going to speak on the topic of Ein Hadvar Tolu Elu Bi. Today she is University of Dana, like always, the Mamad Kiddush Hashem, Rabbi Avram Eliyahu Spry from AB Plumbing for sponsoring today's Mamad Kiddush Hashem, which will be heard all over the world by Ezras Hashem. The Ebeshalom Benshim mit alle Eden, Asimchas Yom Tov mit Nachas, in Yeshua's for alle Eden. Harav Hagon Rabbi Yakov Zev Smith Shlita.
I mean, so we all know, we all feel, I guess we all experience what it means. We say in the beginning of Kabbanas every single day, Ashenu Matayv Chalkeinu, Manoyim Goraleinu. Every year experiences the thrill of Asher Misha Moli Batayra, or the pleasure of Ani Kirvas Alikim Li Toiv, whether it's a davening, a Shabbos, a Yom Tiv. We feel the Dehoibenkeit of V'atam Tiyul Imamleches Kehanim V'goy Kodesh, even in a world that's so far from any Kedusha. But the challenge is when we don't feel that, when the learning doesn't have that geschmack that it's supposed to have, at least for us it doesn't have that geschmack. What do you do when you're facing a world that has abandoned any vestige of Kedusha, and a person has to live the Kedusha in a world that has gone mamish meshuga? So a person looks for chizuk. You know, chizuk is good, but it has a problem. Chizuk doesn't last. And I remember when I was a child growing up, there was one of our neighbors had a real old car, and every other day it stalled. Now the younger boys don't know what that means, but you know, the battery didn't work, so you had to give him a boost. You connected you had a wire to connect the two batteries, and he started going. But tomorrow morning, the same problem. You have to start again. In Ruchnius, a boost is also like that. A chizik is also like that. It gets you started, but it doesn't continue. I think it's much more important to find a yesod that we could take lamaisa, to live with lamaisa, how to deal with the situations that come in so many different forms, which is challenging and it's sometimes frightening. Sometimes you're living against the tide, going against the world. So I'm going to try Bez Hashem b'schus hatzibur, give you something I think very practical, very negei lamaisa, and each on their own can hopefully use this. The Eisamasa Ashiyasun. The Gemara in Avodah Zarah Daf Yuzayin tells a story about Rabbi Loza Bar Dudoi, Ben Dudoi, and probably that's the name that we never heard of, because there's nowhere in Shas, to my knowledge, that we find this Rebbe Loza Ben Dudoi, and there's a good reason for that. You look at the Gemara and you see Nebuch, what a life he lived, a life of depravity. You know, the Maral puts it very bluntly in the Chidush HaGoros on this Gemara. He says, this Elazar ben Dudoi was Oduk Ba'avera, B'chol Levavoi, B'chol Nafshei, B'chol Ma'oidai. And you learn the Gemara, you'll see the details. But he was an unbelievable, unparalleled Ba'avera. And once he heard about a certain Zaina that was 7 in the Horus away, but nothing stopped him. Look, the Maral, he's going b'chol levavoi, b'chol nafshei, and he spent a hoin rav, and he was moist nefesh to go over 7 harais. To make a long story short, during the Avera, pardon me, the Zaina was mafiach, with past gas, which is a pliya. It was obviously a very clear sign min hashamayim. And the pelash b'ployim is this Zaina started becoming a balas musa. And she interpreted this very unusual happening, just like Hafacha Eina Chayzeres, so too Elazar ben Dudoi Ein Mekabel Naisa B'tshuva. Don't even think about doing tshuva. You're gone. Now imagine this Baal Avera B'chol Levavai Nafshe B'chol Moidei, his Madrega. But he traveled the world for an Avera, and now he gets the message that he's hopeless and helpless. For some reason, this ignited the Pintal Yid in him. And he decided, I'm going to do tshuva. I don't care what, I'm going to do tshuva. But he was so desperate, he was so miyuyish, he couldn't do it on his own. He first turned to Harm v'Gavoyas, help me. They said, we can't. Then he turned to Shemayim v'Aretz, help me. They can't. Chamo Levana, they can't. Kechav Mazalais, they can't. There's probably no helpless, hopeless moment in history like this moment. And then he realized the oldest truth. He realized the Yesod of Yiddishkeit. And he said those words, Ein hadava toli elabi. I don't care this, I don't care that. So get me garnish done. A Yid is never helpless, a Yid is never hopeless. And he started to cry. And why did he cry? Until he cried himself to death. And Yatsa Basko v'Amar Rabbi Loza ben Dudoi mizum l'chayalam haba. But the Gemara adds, Rabbeinu HaKadosh heard this story, and Bacha Rebbe, and he said, Yesh kane lama b'chama sham, that I understand. But Yesh kane lama b'sha achas. A moment ago, it wasn't even an hour, a few moments ago, he was the Odot Ba'aver b'cholavavai nafshi b'chol ma'oidai, and now the Basko certified that he's mezumah la'olam haba, and then he added v'loy oid el shekoy noisa Rebbe. Rebbe, he never learned. He was never zeicher to learn. He died b'tech tshuva. But he was teaching me and you and Gans Klal Yisrael the answer to all of our problems. Ein adava toli elabi. A Yid is never helpless. A Yid is never hopeless. A Yid has a bari oilam who's mincha pshuta lekabel shav. And I can't tell you how these words is the master key for all problems. It might look hopeless, it might look helpless, but a Yid in a moment of truth knows a Yid is never hopeless, a Yid is never helpless. Reb Chatzkel used to teach the way he say it in davening 3 times a day. It's a good reminder. Paisech es yodecha umazbia l'chol chai ratzain. So he teaches the Rebbeinu Shalom gives every person his ratzon. Now, of course, not a shallow, spontaneous, superficial ratzon. But if a Yid has a real ratzon, the B'Olam bleibt in the shuldig. But like for Tishkach, why does the person give up? Because he looks and says, I can't do it. But Ein Adav Tolei Bi is the lesson he has to learn. You might ask him, who said Adav Tolei Bi? Maybe my problem or my nisayon is too difficult. Or if you want an nusach achar, I was once talking to a bacha, and I was trying to convince him to do what he has to do, and he said, I can't do it. I said, you're wrong. If you have an nisayon, you could do it. So he asked me, maybe it's too hard for me. And the emes is, these two ideas are one. Ein Adav Tolei Elabi is really why a person could tell himself, if I have an nisayon, I have the ability to overcome it. But Hagufa Kash. Who said? Maybe not. Maybe there's a nisayon that's too big. So I want to tell you to think about it. Just thinking that a person is put in a nisayon that he can't be oimid, I would say is a shemetz of kvira. Now the Gemara says in Avodah Zarah, Daf Gimel, Ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu ba b'trunyam b'yosav. The Gemara is talking about the Rebbeinu Shalom dealing with goyim, and even that the Kel Melech Rachum v'Chanun doesn't put a person in a match that he can't succeed. And how about Avinu Avarachman and us? The Mishnah Seif Makis, Ratz HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'zakis es Yisrael. Not to put a person in a soyin that's too difficult. I once spoke in a certain kehila, and I said this yisoy that a person is bemis never ever put in a soyin that he can't be oimid. And I said I have a list of makaris, but it doesn't need it because it's obvious. The next day I got so many phone calls. Can I see the list? I want to know who said. And I was so surprised. Lama likra svarim. The Baruch Shalom of Avinu Avarachman is going to put a person in a matzah that he has to fail. But I'll tell you what I found. The first encounter with the Yetzer Hara, and that was some Yetzer Hara. The Baruch Shalom told Cain, after he fell into his chet. Imtativ says, if you want to do good, you'll win. Take lecha chukasoi, and Rashi says, ad till the keva, he's out to get you. But the ata timshal boy. The end of the day, it's up to you. Parshas, a little later in the parsha, we find that Modna Maisa, Chanoich, was taken early in his lifetime. Why? Why? Zok Rashi, he was a tzaddik, but the kal b'daitai lo shuvu ularshia. It was very easy for him to slip. Lefikach mi HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'silka v'misasoi b'misoi koydem zmanoi. That means the Rebbeinu Shalom is the ultimate mashkiach tmidi. If someone has an asayin, he has the ability to do it. It's for some reason, maybe it was the door around him, but Chanoich, who was a tzaddik, would not be able to withstand an asayin. That's the case. It's all over. It doesn't go. There's no asayin, you can't win. I'll say, but so lots of people fail. The Torah says they don't try. But it seems that the Chanoich would have an asayin that would be too difficult. The Gemara in Yuma, it's a plea in this Gava, but it's such a powerful raya. Gemara says, Yosef Mechayev the Rishayim. That means if someone says, I couldn't do it, I had a big Yetzirah, I had a big Taiva. Did you have a big Yetzirah than Yosef? And look, Yosef was Ayim b'Bn saying, why can't you? That means the Gemara is saying, there's never a person in history that has a bigger Yetzirah than Yosef. Apply him. And if Yosef did it, you could do it. But here's the big kasha. Yosef didn't do it. The Gemara says in Saita, came that day, he was about to do the affair. And suddenly, the most Duknei Shel Aviv, and that's what stopped him. I don't have the most Duknei Shel Aviv, so why am I held accountable like Yosef? The Torah says, Adarab. Yosef went through a Desoyin day in, day out. The Gemara says, 365 days a year, she pestered him. But this day, it was impossible. If it's impossible, it has to stop. The most Duknei Shel Aviv. The Gemara is telling us when in the Sayin it can be as big as Yosef, but if it's too big, it's going to stop. And if your Sayin is continuing, you have the koyach to do it. We see Nevarim, a Goyal Hadam that kills someone that killed his relative b'shoigig is potter. Okay, he's allowed to kill him. So the Gedolei Achreinim explain because it's too hard to tell someone that Yechem Levavai not to kill someone. That means Ritzicha becomes mutab and it's too hard. Or how about the most Havi Yisraya, Yefas Toyer, person goes to war, he spots a Goyish woman, he's allowed to marry her. What's hepis? So Rashi, it's a Gemara in Kedusha in Dav Chaf Aleph. Torah, you're the Torah, the Soif Daita, that he can't do it. He's at war, he's not at home, he doesn't have his Sviva. The Panmiyafas teaches a Gemara in Ksubas Lamed Gimel. Il Molin Agdul Chananya Mishal Vazaria. If they would have hit Chananya Mishal Vazaria, they would have bowed down to the Avodah Zarah. So what did they do instead? They threw them into the fire. So Frek the Panmiyafas, what's the Marsh trying to say? Chananya, nah, they weren't so big. Nah, they would have failed. Chas v'shal. Zok Adava Pella. Why did Baruch Shalom give it in the mind of a Goyim to throw him into a fire? Why not beat him up like typical? Terry said they couldn't do it. And if they can't do it, it won't happen. And they had to be given a different punishment. But to me, I think the clearest makor is the Gemara in Shabbos Daf Peches Amud Beis. The Gemara says the famous story that Rava was bleeding, and of course the Tzedoiki said, "You're an Amma Paziza. You say Nasa v'Nishma. How could you say Nasa? How could you makabel to do before you know what you have to do?" So it's a big kasha, no? So the Gemara answers that no, we were makabel. We went with the Baruch Shalom makabel no matter what it was. But what's pshat? So Rashi says precious words. Hisalachnu imay b'toim leiv kederach ha'oisem yahava v'samachnu al Hashem shlo yitanenu b'dava shlo yinucha lamad boy. The Yidden were able to accept everything because they knew their Baruch Shalom never gives us something that's too difficult. So why can't we say Nasiv and Nishma? If you're dealing with someone that's not reliable, he might ask you the impossible. But the Yid's emunah in Bar Yolim was so complete that you never have an assignment you can't do. So why can I say Nasiv and Ishma? The Ramban in the Shar Agmul, he says on the pasuk, Hashem Yitzadik Yivchon, she'ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu menaseh el esmi shu yedeya sheyachol amid b'nesayim. The Archaim HaKadosh says it twice in Parshas Hazinu. Now I know there's a Tzidkas HaTzadik in Ois Mem Gimel that seems to say differently, but you look closely, he's not saying anything different. But let me tell you what the Goyen once said. The Goyen once said, where does he see Neflois HaBoiri? The Goyen was a genius. Where was he impressed by Neflois HaBoiri? How the Rebbeinu Shalom is able to make every person custom-made for his Nesayin. Reuven has one Nesayin, but Shimon doesn't get that because Shimon can't deal with that. Reuven could. Shimon has a different Nesayin than Reuven. And every person's Nesayin is custom-made. The Tzad HaShava, if you have a Nesayin, you could be Ayman on it. Mazbiya l'chol chai rotza, and the Rebbeinu Shalom gives a person the rotza to do it if he really wants. But you know what's interesting? Going back to the first Makar, Im Teitev says, and if not, lepesach hatas reibitz. Zok the Gemara in Kedushin, on the pasuk va'atal, the end, atal timshal boy, im ataroitzem, atal moishal boy. Zok Rashi, if you really want, you could do it. Now, who is this Yetzer Hara? What is this Yetzer Hara? So look at the Gemara Kedushin, that ties this pasuk, Gemara Kedushin. Kashi Yetzer Hara shafil yoitzroi koroi ra. Yitzis shel Adam is mizgaber or mizchadesh b'chol yoim or mevakesh hamisoi. Vil moya kadosh baruch hu oizri eina yachol. Pil. That means the person maybe doesn't have the ability to be oimid. But then there's the unlimited siyata d'shmaya. I once saw a letter Rabbi Yochanan Levovitz wrote, and he pointed out something very profound. David had a son, Shlomo, who was going to assume the throne in a very, very difficult period. And he has to give Atzavah and Chizuk. He has to give everything all in one. But look at the three words that he chose as his Tzavah, as his Chizuk. He tells Shlomo, V'chazakta v'yisa le'ish. So yes, his pshat, but I think the pshat is even pashut. If a person understands he goes through life, it's all up to me. V'chazakta v'yisa le'ish. Alain is rain, the tzaddikim say. A person that feels he could do it, will do it. Avada you turn to chizik, that's for sure. But at the end of the day, it's up to me. You can't blame anybody else, but if you want to do it, you could do it. And then a person is living empowered with the shikloli of Rebbe Loza ben Dudoy, ein adav atoli alabi. That means a person in life has nisyanis. Look at it and say, wow, this is a moyodik nisyayin. This is such a big nisyayin. But guess what? I'm always a little bigger. That's the aleph of my emunah. I'm always a little bigger. V'chazakta v'yisa le'ish. You know, Rabbi Yochim Taka, many times he writes what he calls a moshel hedget, which means it's a moshel from a not a Yiddish source, nothing bad, but it's a big lesson. I'm going to tell you a moshel hedget. There was this guy, big football fan, that was his life. And one year, his team made it to the Super Bowl, it's the big game. He was so nervous because this mamish kihem chayeinu v'arach yameinu. But he bought a ticket, he went down, and he went there early waiting for the game. But he was so nervous that he started feeling, his heart was pounding, he started feeling chest pain. So they called 911, and they said, you're having a massive heart attack, we have to take you to the hospital. He goes, no, I can't go, I have to watch, this is my game, my life. He goes, no, you're coming. And they schlepped him, and he had a massive heart attack. A few days later, when he's on the recovery, he says, don't worry, your team won, we recorded it, you're not going to miss it. And he said, they told him, you should know, your team was losing and losing and losing. Mamish, the end, it was Mamish, Shaloi Keder Chatev, and they won. And he watched the game, and he said, it's unbelievable. If I would have been there, he said, he would have died. Because they were losing the whole game, there was no hope. At the last minute, there was Mamish, a touchdown, another touchdown, but it was unbelievable. So he says, it was unbelievable. I watched the game, I enjoyed every moment, because when I started watching, I knew we won. So what do you have to be worried about? And I don't know if that story ever happened, I made it up. But that's the story of me and you. A person that has amun in Bari Olam, before he starts his day, he knows it's up to me. Ein hadavar tolui al libi, and the mashkiach tamidi, Bari Olam is watching carefully if I have the koyach to be oimed. If not, it won't happen. I mean, Yosef was such a dehoibin neshama that had to be stopped midway. Did must yukle. But for the rest of us, we're given an asayin like the goyins, nifloyas, habayra, that's perfectly custom made for me. Imagine you start the day with an amunah in Bari Olam and yourself. That I'm ready for today. It might be big, but I'm bigger. That's the real yisoid of Ein hadavar tolui al libi. But nebuch, too many people don't know this. And they look at it and they get scared. And they realize maybe I can't do it. Or what's probably the avi avois hamazikin is a person has it all figured out. I would have been good, but if I would have got a better job, a better shidduch, a better child, a better house, a better health. You know, in Yiddish it's the word volt gewen azoi, if only this and that. Once a person is paralyzed by that, he has no koyach. Why should you fight a losing battle? But that's why Ein hadavar tolui al libi is the site of everything. This is exactly the way it's supposed to be for me. This is custom made. This is the Baruch Shalom's niflois habayri. And you have to picture Avinu Avarachamon begging us, I'm giving you an opportunity. A nes, a nesayin is one and the same. A nesayin is a yirida l'tzorech aliyah. And the bigger the nesayin, the bigger the aliyah is. Look at Avram's aliyah from his nesayinis. A nes is a flag. It raises a person. You look at the end of Parashat Vayera. The Baruch Shalom is talking to Adam Arishan and his Meridik in Nesayin. Kach no as bincha asher hafta. Imagine, was there a big Nesayin in history? But Zog Rashi, beautiful words. Ein no el loshen bakosha. Omar, the Baruch Shalom told Avram, b'bakosha mecha, I beg you, amoid li b'zeh ha-nesayin. Person has to picture in his mind's eye. Every morning the Baruch saying, I'm giving you the perfect nesayin for your neshama, for your aliyah. Amoid na b'nesayin hazeh. Umazbiya l'chol chai ratzon. Now someone asks, why does it have to be hard? It's a good kasha. But you know, taught us the answer. Bikesh Yankov Leisha b'shalva. Had a life of difficulty. Kafsel Rug Shel Yosef. Zokti Rabbi Chaskel in his letter, in Michtav Kuf Lamed Ches. Someone asked, why does it have to be hard? Because he doesn't understand what Olam Haba is. He doesn't understand that Olam Haba is a product of Olam Hazeh. And from Tzara Agra is what's creating Olam Haba. So someone asks, why does it have to be hard? Doesn't begin to understand the oimik of Olam Haba. Nisyonis are, he says, is the t'nai of Olam Haba. And there's the mashkiach to me that's watching that make that it's perfectly done. But here's what's so painful. Because I'm in yeshiva, you can see Bachim with such future, such potential. But Darka Shel Olam, life, like the Medrash, Mr. Shram quotes, Ha'odnai Niver Lamed Ben Nesayin. They come to the first Nesayin, and they say, oh, it's not for me. You see, look what's happening to me. There's something wrong with me. They don't know it's not a Gzeira Ra, it's an opportunity. It's a stepping stone for godless. Nesayin is pick up a person. And we pay the price. Oh, do we pay the price? People had Bacham that had such potential, but they didn't have this training. That's the derech of Aliyah. But you have to believe in hadavar tolui al libi. You know, there's a Maral in Avos Perik Vov, the end of Mishnah Zayin. It's very not his style. Maral is always very positive, you know. But he writes, Re'isi Bonim, I see Talmidim, he's talking about Talmidim, Ashalibam kepischei shel ulam. And that's what Chazal say about Kiva, who's bigger than Moshe, whatever that means. But I saw people that have a potential, Achurun l'kabel kol haTorah kula. V'achisam nevdu v'hoya k'loi hoyu k'shar amayoretz. You're going from being as big as Rabbi Akiva to being a nobody. Chai tzvokis, Chai Hashem tzvokis, he writes, a shvua. Im ein roi l'kroya al zeh k'moy al sefer Torah shenisraf. This what you see today. People with such future, but they end up in a world that's such unbearable nisyonis, and they think, see, it's not for me. Look, I'm not Mesugah. Look, it's happening to me. They don't realize that's the opportunity. That's the invitation for godless. Chinuch writes, there's an Issa D'Oraisa of Baltashchis on a garga shel chardal, on a mustard seed. And I ask you, how much Baltashchis is there on the Neshama Yakar that could grow to be a Gadol B'Yisrael? Kepischei shel ulam. But he didn't read the message. He didn't get the message. But maybe it's a little more practicality. You know, it's the oldest question. The Rebbe Hashem gives us an Nisayan to test us. Doesn't the Rebbe Hashem know the Asidus? The Rebbe Hashem knows me, knows what I could do. How could the Nisayan be? The Rebbe Hashem has to figure out what I am? I saw a beautiful shmuz in the Mishcha Hashem and Parshas Vayera. One point I thought was precious. He said, Avad the Rebbe Hashem knows what you could be, but you have to know what you could be. When a person is Oimid ben Nisayan, he's empowered, he's energized to go bigger and bigger. See, the first Nisayan that a person is Oimid in, he realizes, maybe it's up to me. Maybe Taka. Ain't Adav Tali be. So the way he puts it, it's not the Bnei Shalom has to know what we are. We have to be told what we are. And I found this command in the same idea, the Chayav Slavavais, in Yichra Maisa, Perikei. Alecha Lizar, he writes, don't give in to the Eitzar, even on a Kleinikite. Because then you're believing, maybe I can't do it. Fakert. Take that Nisayan and tshmetter it. And take it and make it your aliyah. Then you're going to go weiter and weiter. And that's the healthy way of looking at the daily nisyanis of life. It's opportunity, not gzeira ra. I saw a beautiful story with a beautiful halacha l'maisa. The Mir Yeshiva, as we know, spent the war years in Shanghai, in China, and they were coming back. They traveled by boat. It was a long trip, and they were all big masmidim. But Reb Shmuel Berman was the masmid then also, and Mamish like pasuk b'megiros. He didn't stop learning, and they saw some beautiful scenes along the way, but he wasn't interested. But they came to some place near San Francisco, the Golden Gate Bridge, supposed to be the most beautiful scene in Gans America. So another masbid told him, Shmuel, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. You're not coming back here again. Come out, and go back and learning. So on this body says, you're right. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to see this beautiful scene. But for me, it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to give that up for the Blot Gemara. I'm not going to have such a thing again. What a healthy way of looking at life. Something is schwer. It's something you don't want to give up. It's too precious to give up. Azoy vayit that the Sifri Machshava wonder, if Nisyanis are so great, so why do we have Al Tiveinu Dei Nisayan? That's a very good kasha. So the obvious teretz is, who knows? Maybe you won't make it in the Nisayan. Don't ask for Nisyanis. But there's a very pashta teretz. If the Baruch Shalom gives you a Nisayan, you have that Mashgiach Tmidi, you could do it. If you're going to bring it upon yourself, you're a Nisayan, who told you could do it? You don't know the Asidus, but Yoram does. So Nisayan is always guaranteed if it comes from Bar Yolam. A person that said, I'm going to go down that street, I'm going to go to that party, I'm going to go to that meeting, I'm not worried about it. Who told you not to worry? Who guaranteed you? What you have to do, you have to do. But that's the side of it. A person, like in that game, you start in the morning, you won. But one difference, you can't sit back and enjoy. Life is amelis, life is avoida. And this is all the lesson of Rabbi Elazar ben Dudoy. But maybe there's more practicality. A person, throughout life, he has times he needs a Yeshua. He cries out, On Hashem, Hoshiyano. And we wonder, what's the Pesach Sha'arim in the Baruch Shalom's world? Where do we open the Shari Bracha? So maybe I could tell you a Gemara. The Gemara in Bava Metzia Daf Pei Hey speaks about Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Loza ben Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, who was at the end of his life a tzaddik nizga. And the Gemara says that after he passed away, they wanted to bury him in the Ma'ora together with his father and his Eidah, Rabbi Loza ben Shimon and Shimon bar Yochai. But a snake surrounded the entire Ma'ora where they're buried and wouldn't allow him in. So it was very strange. People were wondering, this is a tzaddik also, why doesn't he belong there? So people thought that maybe he's not such a big tzaddik. Yotze Baskel v'omra loipnei shezeh godel mizeh elezeh hoye b'tzar ma'ora. Rabbi Loza and Rabbi Shimon had a tzar ma'ora. They lived in a cave 13 years, unbearable yisurim. V'zeh Rabbi Yossi loy hoye tzar ma'ora. You know what the gate, you know what the Pesach of Sha'ar Bracha is? When a person does something that's difficult. The word tsar, from Tzara Agra. That's the master key that opens even the Shari Bracha in the Baruch Shalom's world. Doesn't say that he wasn't a big tzaddik. He did all the mitzvahs, but he didn't have the Schwerkeiten that his father and Zayda had. Because the Baruch Shalom bleibt nicht schuldig. And this is the derech hachayim that a person has to live with. Nisyonis are not exerera, it's an opportunity. It's the Yeshua that we're looking for. Maybe it comes in disguise of an Nisyon, but that's where a person grows. I once said a word, and I found very big kids that Evan Ezer says this. Klal Yisrael were facing lahashmid laharig imminently. Amish, the worst sakana Klal Yisrael. And then there was a glimmer, a ray of hope, for some strange reason, estimated to become the Malka. And it went on a long 5 years, like the Cheshbon. And people are hoping, and Esther certainly is hoping, one day she'll save Klal Yisrael. All of a sudden she gets a message from Mordechai, you have to go now to Achshverosh and tell them that we can't go on like this, we have to be saved. So Esther responded through the shliach, no, you don't understand. If I go without being called Achaz Dasei, I'm going to be killed. So Mordechai responded, Al tadami b'nafshech, don't think about yourself. If you're going to be quiet, you're going to lose your opportunity. Umi yoideim la'eis kazois higata lamalchus. Now what's shot? Lamaisa, things are going wonderful. I'm moving nicely. Why go now and risk Achaz Dasei lahamois? But there's a beautiful message there. You got it all wrong. You think life is going along smoothly and, hope for the best. Sometimes life is the Tsar Ma'ora. Sometimes you have to be Moise Nefesh. It's such an incredible Mesiras Nefesh, but that might be the Atzol of Klal Yisrael. You got it all wrong. Your life is not just to go along with what seems to be nature. Your call now is, this is your Tachas HaChayim. And if it means Achaz Dasam, that's what you have to do. And then I was thinking, maybe that's the Gemara that we began with. Bemis Tepela. Bocha Rebbe cried, Yesh Kalam B'Sha'achas. What, Rebbe couldn't forgive someone has Olam Haba? But Rebbe understood, saw something very deep. The opportunity of an Nisayan. This Rebbe Loza ben Dodoi had a Mashanadik Nisayan to give up. He lived his life of terrible Averis, and he got this smack in the face, a message from the Zoyna, and he had all the reason to give in. But he understood that now, this is what the Baruch Shem wants from me. And maybe Rebbe cried, because we don't learn that lesson of Elazar ben Dodoi. You look at a situation, and we misunderstand it. We don't realize that the real oimik of it is talking to us. Ein hadavar toli bi is a person lives his life, it's a gebench to life. He's starting every day with the atzlacha before he started. But I want to tell you one more point. And this is Karva Libi. And the pasuk in Zechariah, Perek Ches, pasuk Gimel, paints a magnificent picture of Yemos HaMashiach. Oid Yeshu, Zekenu, Zekenais, Berchav Shalayim, and people can be old. It's a beautiful, beautiful picture of Yemos of the man of the Geula. The very next pasuk seems to be totally incongruous. Kayam Hashem Tzavakos, Ki Yipolei Be'enei Sheres Ha'am Hazeh B'Yom HaMahem. It's going to be a Pella by you. You, Dar Achron, you're going to have a Pella? So the Barelim, you have a Pella? I also have a Pella. Gam Be'enei Yipolei No Hashem Tzavakos. Right in the middle of this magnificent, glorious picture of the Zman of Geula, there's a Pella, and the Baruch has a Pella. Hayipolei Mi Hashem Dava, that I learned. And here the Barelim has a Pella? And where does this fit into the Neflois of the Yemos HaMashiach? So if you look at the Gemara Sukkah, Daf Nun Beis, you have a little more information. The Gemara speaks about that day they're going to have a hesped, and tzaddikim are going to cry, and Rishayim are going to cry. For Gemara, Rishayim cry, I understand. But why are tzaddikim crying? Heich Yechoilin Lichboish Har Gavoy Kazeh. How do we do it? Afakadosh Baruch Hu Tami Mohem, sagt die Gemara. You Yidden, you think, you don't understand how did we do it? You're right. Because even Bari Olam is saying, Gam Be'ena Yipalei. Afakadosh Baruch Hu Tami Mohem. And that's the pasuk that we just learned. So now we see a little more. This question, the Pella by us, by Bari Olam, is part and parcel of the Zman HaGeula. But what does it mean? How do you understand that? What does it mean Bari Olam is a Pella? I'll tell you, Pshat. And you see it every day, because I'm proud to say, because you are this Gemara. You are learning the Gemara for me to understand. Let me tell you about the biggest Pella in history. It's called the Olam HaTorah in Tafshin Pei Vav. You know, we see today yeshivas, koyolim, Beis Yaakovs, not just growing, exploding all over the world. Limud HaTorah is such a commodity. So the younger Dar thinks that's the way it always was. But we know, I mean, people older than I certainly know, that America, the Stein is Enigment Treif, Eretz Echels Yoshveha, and everything else about this machine that destroyed Yiddishkeit. But there was a hope. There was a yeshiva, Tervadah started, and Chaim Berlin started, but there was mamish, you could count them on one hand, the yeshivas. But the hope was the European yeshivas. Many yeshivas brought Gedolim from Europe, and then came Hitler Machshemai and destroyed European Yiddishkeit. The year 1945, Lemesparam, was probably the biggest year of Yush in history. The American scene was far from perfect, very far from perfect. There was no longer Europe, there was no Gedolei Olam. 6 million Yidden were destroyed. And 80 years later, you see a Yoifi Shalai Hoya Ba'olam. You see Balabatim, in a world that has idolized the geld, money, Balabatim living toivli, toiras pichem, yalfi zova chesed. I mean, I remember when I was young, they were Rabbanim, the Rosh Hashiva, and Balabatim, they punched in the clock, they learned to Kvayyitim. And today, the Yoifi of Limud HaTorah is the Balabatim Haraving, spending hours a day learning Shas Be'iyun. How many programs there are encouraging learning with responsibility, with fahers, with this. It's unbelievable the creativity that Yidden have seen in these days. We would love to say Ach Shadara, but we know there's plenty of problems in the world that we're living in. But this, the Kuda, the Olam HaTorah that we see today, we could say it was never so easy to learn Torah. Every person, in every level, in every language, in every country, wherever he is, today there's a phone. You could pick up a phone, dial a few numbers, and you could connect to Kol HaTorah Kulei Pshutai K'mashmoi. You could listen to your Maggid Shir's shir when you're out in business. You don't miss anything. There's the ability of Torah that never was since the Torah was given. And where is this taking place? With the Stein Zenig Mentreif? I had a Rebbe, a Talmud of Brisker Rav, So once I forgot what it was. Something I said, "Oh yeah, Zam is sugar in the Welt." He goes, "Sie nicht kein Welt dafür. Sie nicht kein Welt dafür, Heinz. It's not a world." And how you understand it? You know what the answer is? Adarabah. It came to such a default, to such a bankruptcy, and the Torah in America was bankrupt. And when it comes to a point that we can't do it, then we see that Musyuknei Shalavinu Avarachim saying, Yidin, you want to learn? I'm going to give you Torah on a silver platter. It doesn't make sense. For us it's a pella, and for Bayolim it's a bigger pella. Because you would want to learn in a dar that has glorified money and careers, and look how many thousands and thousands of Yungalite devoting their lives to Abaya and Rava. Isn't that a pella in your eyes? Isn't that a pella even in Bari Olam's eyes? Yeah, the Mashkiach Tmidi can't believe how devoted we are. Gam be'ena yipalei. You know, this bacher that asked me, how do you know I could do it? How do you know it's too hard for me? I told him, you're right. But you forgot a Gemara. Because Be'emes, if you know the Kisvei Agro, the going was very brief to the point. Never said superlatives, never said, try to glamorize something. But Punk Disvar, that he says it on that Gemara in Nun Beis, he didn't write it, but he's quoted, this is an Ika Godel v'nechbad, ashe kol oisha atzlachas hanushi toli bezeh. Toil olav. What is that? So the guy asked the kasha in Sukkah Nun Beis and Kedushin Lamid, Yitzis shel Adam misgaber olav b'chol yoyim, and there's one nusach mischadish la b'chol yoyim umavakish la misai. About a pasuk, vil mole HaKadosh Baruch Hu she'oiz alai eina yachal. So the guy asked the obvious question: why is the Baruch make it like that? We can't do it, and our kasha is even stronger because l'maisa and HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'avachim yiraisav. And he has another kasha in the Gemara, Ayin Sham, but he says this yisoid that he calls the Ikke Gadol v'Nechbad asher kol oisha atzlachas hanushi toil olav. Af HaKadosh Baruch Hu masa koach bi Adam lichboish as Yitzray. Even though the Moshe gave a person a lot of koiches, but he can't do the job completely. Leisashlam hamaisa kiyada Adam v'kashem oid ala Adam love al tachlisa. You're talking about the guy in the Giba Shebegiboyrim. He understood that sometimes an assignment is so difficult that we can't do it. So what do? HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't put us in failure. Ein biyodai rak lahaschal amolacha v'lasis kol ma shebekoichi lasois. And the rest is be'eza aliki hamalava la'adam lahavi oisel elapoyel hagomor. It's mamish. I saw in those words that concept. There's a mashkiach Tmidi watching. If you're going to do all you can, if you're going to have a ratzon, a real ratzon, you're going to have siyata d'shmaya. There's no doubt about it. And he says it clearly. The Baruch Shalom is boichen lei v'choykek leis, knows when you're doing all you can, and then you can't do it. Don't worry. The Baruch Shalom is shuldik. We really can't do it. I think the Olam HaTorah today is something that can't be explained. But it's the biggest raya in Adava Toli Elabi. It's mamish living like that mashal hedget. Just do what you have to do, give it all you got, and the Baruch will give the rest. I'll ask another question. You think about the moistness of chesed that we have today. It's a pella. Someone once showed me a gemach directory list. I said, what's this? He goes, it's a list in alphabetical order, all the gemachin in Brooklyn. I look at it, I said, Baruch, where'd you get such children from? I mean, we know what goes on. I can't mention one without the other, but kulam ahuvim, the gemachin in chesed, in atzolos nefashos, in helping. And where's this taking place? In a world that never was. It's called the me generation. I saw someone wearing a t-shirt, I love me. There's a new word invented, narcissism, a narcissistic. What that means? That means someone that's mamish living kol kulei me. Anivav siyoid. And in this world, there are Yidden that are living for Yidden. And each of these people, these Malachei Rachamim in so many forms, you go to hospitals, it's unbelievable. Malachei Rachamim who are living with the words, not of I love me, but the Chaim Volozh's Heilige Werte, Shezeh Kol Adam, Loy La'atzmoi Nivra, Rak L'hoy La'chini. Thousands and thousands of such yoifi walking around living for yenim. Maybe it's the same aside, because in such a world there has to be a little more siyata d'shmaya. And how about another yoifi probably never was in history? How about the Shmiras Haloshin revolution? You know, Chavis Chaim writes in all of his ksavim how bad Lashon Hara is. Today we see tens and thousands of men, women and children living lives free of Lashon Hara. I once heard two girls in the camp, two girls talking, must be 5 or 6 years old. One said something I didn't hear, but the other one said, ouch, my ears hurt when I hear Lashon Hara. Hanira Keboisam Hazem. Unbelievable. There was probably never such a victory. Of course, there's a way to go, don't get me wrong. But you know what the answer is? I'll tell you. Adarabban. In a world where freedom of speech is a constitutionally protected right, I have a right to get up and talk in Madison Square Garden about the president, say what I want. You can't say a word. A person can say what he wants and he's protected. But lately, laida, with technology, a person could say a Lashon Hara and it travels the world. It goes viral. There's even a new term. It goes viral. What does that mean? But what the Medrash says, Adam Oymid B'tzipayri, and he kills someone at the other end of the world. But today it's much worse than that. He says something and it spreads in one of the many venues that Lashon Hara could spread, via Shlefarta, and Lashon Hara, assassination of a person could go around the world in a matter of minutes, maybe even less. And today we see thousands of people living zero tolerance for Shmiras Haloshin. Isn't that a pella? I could hear the birds say, Kindlech, how'd you do that? I put you in a world that has made Lashon Hara an art. And you're asking shilas about saying an extra word, like a shidduch, or a job applicant. Don't you hear the birds say, Gam be'ena yipale? And what about this pella? And we live in a world, they say it's a combination of the Dor HaMabul and the Eretz Aretz and Mitzrayim. And that's not a guzma. I don't want to go, talking this sneeze or not sneeze, but you think about how depraved the world is around us. Today we see there's no protection to this. Parzuchayim as Migdalai. Yom Gava Oyev V'Tibok Ha'oyer. Im Yahareg B'Migdash Shem Kayin V'Navi. Yeshivas, families, no one's immune. And the same telephone, the same phone, that you could connect to Kol HaTorah Kula, Rachmana Litzlan 1,000 times, a person to connect to the Memta Shari Tumah in a press of a button. And then you see again the Efshel Fartam, and I won't mention any names, but Yechidim and Moistis that are devoting their lives, literally, some were Moisa Nefesh Kipshutai, to fight technology. The Soini HaGodel, like the Haroitz L'Shariashcha Mishnei Alamis. And you see in this world the sparkle, the shenkai, the yoifi of Kedushas Einayim. It's unbelievable. The Zelu Zeh is mamish shaloi kederech hateva. Someone told me with the spiders, I was driving up to the mountains, and one of these big billboards, there's an advertisement for Shmiras Einayim. I said, I don't advise you to read billboards, but that's beautiful. In our streets, you ever notice big posters, an achshador in a certain sense? But isn't that a pella? In a world that's mamish nit kanvelta filu, there's such a devotion for that. But to me is the biggest hispilus. It's not just gedolei olam, zechayin l'vrocha, the moisa nefesh mamish. But today we see balabatim, personalities, world-renowned figures that are talking about their struggles, their failures, their machazik others. It's become a nachlas ha'om. It's bill of ploy. And you think about it, the whole thing is really, it's a private inyan, and people are very sensitive with that. Why should... But people get up and are machazik others. I give up big money. I don't go to a certain meeting because it's sneeze. I don't go to a certain show or a certain party. But isn't that a pella? I mean, you have to be deaf not to hearing Bari Olam say, look at my kintalach. I opened up the arsenal of the Yetzer Hara and gave them the worst tum in history. And look how they sparkle from Kedusha. Isn't that kipshutai? Gam be'ena yipolei? But because if someone lives with that emunah, that if I have an assignment I could do it, he could do it. And he could do the impossible. And he could go on a daily basis and go against the world, go against the trend. And it's true, Vu megate and vu meshtate, we see the ugliness of the nisyanis. But for someone that has a neshama, vu megate and vu meshtate, we see the shenkite that even by Olam is exclaiming, Gam be'ena yipalei. Torah, Chesed, Shmiras Haloshin, Kedushas Einayim. In a certain sense, is we have these madregas unprecedented in history. But Libi Oimeli, I think the biggest pella and the biggest mechazik of all are my heroes. My heroes are Balei Tshuva. I'll tell you why. We have a notion, young Bachim think that there always was Balei Tshuva. My Rebbeim who lived in Europe, they would say a lashon, Achas Choisu Pirs Makos. There's one famous Baal Tshuva who Mamash was a spokesman for the Reform movement. He became a spokesman for Yiddishkeit. But there were no Balei Tshuva like today. And today you see thousands and tens of thousands all over the world. You know why that's so necessary? Because that's really the clincher. That's really makes everything else possible. Why taka punkt our do we see this ruach tahara? But what's really, why is about Tshuva my hero and your hero, I'm sure? Think about it. Each is a different story. Different parts of the world, different family. But typically, they were assimilated, a few dairis, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, they lived without a restriction, period. They did what they wanted, when they wanted, nothing. They do what you want in a world like this. That's where they lived. And mit them all, they want to become true, they want to come from. And they change entire lifestyles. Not just they stop talking like that, or they take that technology and throw it out of the house. They take everything of 30, 40, 50 years and throw it out of the house. And they change entirely. Mamish changing lifestyles of 30, 40, 50 years. Because they are the greatest spokesman for Ein Hadavar Tolui Ela Bi. You could do the impossible if you really want to. They did everything what they wanted. Now they're medaktik in every sifkot and halacha. And then you have myself and Rashim Ke'erki. You hear the Rav says, this doesn't belong in your house. Or you should have more time for learning. Or maybe you should be a little more tzniistic. We say, I can't. I just can't change. And if someone's alarmed, they'll say, so Salanti used to say, to change 1 meter like harder than finishing Gan Shas. So I can't. And then you have to inhale the ruach of tahara of Balei Tshuva. That changed every single part of their lives. Because they realized that we won before we start if we care. They realized that Maseach Hasyodecha Umazbia L'chol Chai Rotzen. If I had time, I'll tell you Balei Tshuva that I know that they're my biggest inspiration. They don't take any b'di'eveds. Someone that 30 years ago was part of a assimilated family for 5 dairis. And they're not going to take any kula unless it's l'chol hadayis. And these are all over. That we could do whatever we want to do if we're determined. And we could change, and we could grow, and we could live. Ein Hadavar Tolui Ela Bi. And the Baruch Shalom gave us this siyur and this dar achar because we do need change. And it's there for you. Whether some people need chizik in learning, or in chesed, or in shmiras haloshin, or in kedushas einayim. But the chizik is all over. Vu megate and vu mishtate is another eloquent testimony that you could be much bigger. Look what I changed, why can you change? And that's the uniqueness of our door. Mitzad echad, we have nisyonis. Shaloi sorim avoseinu. Unparalleled nisyonis. And laida, we have nefilas. Rachmana litzlan. Unparalleled in history. But equally true, the atzlacha, the aliyah, the unprecedented growth in every part of Yiddishkeit is because now the Baruch Shalom is giving special siyata d'shmaya. The yoifi of Torah has to rub off to us. The Shmiras Haloshin. But all crying out, Ein Adav Toli Elabi. And today we see, Mamish Yitzri Shel Adam, either Mischadesh or Misgaber, and they're both true. But then again, the Merkava of Kedusha is Mischadesh and Misgaber B'chol Yoim. And that's my point today. Each person has his own little Veltala with his own Nisyonis. And the Chizuk is temporary. But to be empowered that if I have an Nisyon, I can do it, I will do it, and I can't forget it because the whole world is crying out, you could do it. The Gemara says in Kedush, in Yuma Daf Lametes, this Kadishtem Visem Kedoshim, Adam Mekadosh Atzmei Ma'at, Mekadsh Noisei Harbe. Notice the Lashon, a little bit brings a lot. Zogtem Sil Shisharm, the end in Perek Chavav, Inyan HaKedusha, Kofalhu. Tchilasai Avoida. You have to work. Soifei Gemol, you get a grant, a government grant that's a Toin Rav. Tchilasai Yishtadlus, V'Soifei Matana. What we see today is the Soifei Matana that our Zaydis cry their eyes out, and Ma'aseh Nefesh to see in America that should have Yiddishkeit. Avada, the phase 1, Mekadsh Noisei, sometimes is hard. But this phase 2, Mekadsh Noisei Harbe, the Soifei Gemul, the Soifei Matana, is what we see all over. Remember once I was talking to a Bacha, and I was trying to be mechazik him to do more than he's doing. He says, what do you want from my life? I'm only human. I said, you're not allowed to say that. You're not allowed to say I'm only human. You're a Pele in the Bnei Shlam's eyes, Gam Be'ena you Pele. A human is limited. Someone that's a Pele, even a Bari Olam, is not limited. A person has to have a moon in the Bnei Shlam and a moon in himself. There's words of Tzaddik, you see the fire burning off the pages. In Oisnun, Kufnun Dal, and Tzidkas HaTzadik. Keshem shetzorech Odam laham Hashem Yisborach, Kach tzorech achagach lahaman ba'atzmai. Hear that? As important, maybe step 2 of Amunah Kadosh Baruch Hu is Amunah in oneself. And that's Pshat the Pasuk Vayaminu b'Hashem u'v'Moshe Avdoi. A Yid is not human. A Yid is part of the unlimited Siyata D'Shmaya that Vayaminu b'Hashem u'v'Moshe Avdoi. That we could take a moment of an Nisayon and make Yesh Kain Olam b'Sha'achas. Because Ein Adav Toli Elabi. Let me just Messiah with a story I could say, but Didi Havi Uvda. I was a Bacha and I had a certain big problem, and I went to the Stipler. It was a very, very interesting story. It was about Tzari Shabbos, and it was very old time, and he wasn't taking people. But kids, they just pushed me in, and the Stipler was very nice to me. I'm not sure why. But I told my problem. He said, you know, I also have I had problems in this world. He once said he didn't have a good day. And then he said, the Chavetz Chaim had a very difficult year, as we know. But you know what the Chavetz Chaim said? And he told me these heilige Werte. My ganze Leben is a dank jener Jahr. When a year that he couldn't learn to daven, it was so unbearable. But he held on strong. So the Chavetz Chaim said these heilige Werte. I heard from the Stipler. Mein ganze Leben, ich bin a dank jener Jahr. And he told me, he gave me a bracha, and I left. And I was too young to appreciate it. But now I'm thinking, this is mamish how he yisoid. He had an unbearable Nisayon. Vayaminu b'Hashem of Moshe Av, he never gave up. But maybe more than that. Chavetz Chaim accomplished what no Yulad Isha in our time is able to accomplish. Because he had the Paiseyach Sha'orim. He had the Tsar Ma'orah in the most unbelievable way. But he didn't give up. And the chizuk that he got from that year is unimaginable. You know, a person that went through Mamish, he said, Chavetz Chaim say, he never thought about look at the Gemara again. I don't know exactly what it was, but it was something that was unbearable. And he came back to full learning. Can you imagine what every other Nisayon looked like? If I went through this, I did it, what scares me? He's able to go and write a Chavetz Chaim and a Shmiras Haloshin and a Mishnah Berurah and everything. But most of all, the unbelievable Siyata D'Shmaya that Yid was Zoicha. The Soifei Gemul, the Soifei Matana defies explanation. Look at the world, how many millions of hours of learning from the Chavetz Chaim Sforim. Gam be'ena yipola, he lived in his lifetime and beyond. Eden Tire, we have tremendous koiches. By Aminu Bashem of a Moshe Avda, we have to realize that we are the Pella in the Baruch Shalom's eyes. And we have to continue being that Pella until we'll Zeicha to bring the Geula that we are so much part of. B'meher v'yameinu, Amen.
Gewaltig, Shkoyer, B'Shem Ikon I'd like to thank Rav Rabbi Yakov Zev Smith. You changed us all. You gave us chizik for the whole year. Gewaltig. Eine Dove Tolle, bei jeder kann sich machazig sein. Also like to thank Rabbi Yedidi and Rabbi Avram Rio Spry for Menado sein, der handige Kiddush Hashem, like always. Der Eber Shalom Benchen mit Simcha v'nachas, lange gute gesunde Jahr, und Jahr voll mit Simchas. The next year is right now. The Skvere Dain, Shadas of Tshuva, Dalal Chok Shechan Aruch. Aber Chaim Nakashon hat Gushbach gesagt, soll ich Hebron, damit schon mal raus, mein Zitka Yagel Teviade, Kaddish.